I'm in. All right. I'm going to dive right in, guys and gals from all over Canada. This is very exciting for me to share this with you. This is a brand new webinar appearing here for Charity Village and only for Charity Village. So this is very exciting. Before I dive in, I want to say a huge thanks to the folks at Charity Village for certainly for having me and but also for a never-ending stream of just fantastic content, and so I'm really excited to be part of that, but just a huge service to our sector. So let's dive in. Goldilocks and the 3 sponsorship packages. I'm going to frame our goals for the session. I'm going to introduce myself, and I'm going to kind of set some very simple, maybe not ground rules, but an understanding, I suppose, of sponsorship. You're going to hear some terminology you may not be familiar with. Flag those questions as they come up. I'll be saying things like property and asset and inventory. I'm going to define it as I go. If I forget, please call me out on it, and surely someone will remind me to touch on these things. So goals, simply put, we're going to look at some actions you can take today to bring in more sponsorship dollars. If you are looking for a highly theoretical, philosophical view of sponsorship, this is not the session for you. We're going to look at some case studies outlining common mistakes and best practices, the end of gold, silver, bronze sponsorship packages, but also what to replace them with. I'm going to teach you some prospecting secrets, and I'm going to teach you about activation and fulfillment to help you close next year's sponsorship. Activation and fulfillment, I'm going to define later, so you don't have to call me out on that one yet. Okay, so that's me. For those of you who know me or have seen me recently, as it turns out, I'm not as bald as I thought I was, and I've grown a bunch of hair, and my beard's really long. I sort of look like I've been lost in the wilderness for a few years. So you probably won't recognize me if you see me on the street, but nevertheless, I used to look like that. I run a company called the Sponsorship Collective. We're a boutique marketing firm. I'm putting the emphasis on marketing for a reason. It's going to keep coming up. And we focus on nothing but sponsorship strategy, building inventory, the things you have to sell, and asset valuation, what those things are worth. And we do sponsorship coaching. Now, we do this on both sides of the table for sponsorship seekers or properties and sponsors or brands. So we work with both sides of the table on this in the sponsorship space. I've done everything from grassroots, a couple $1,000 local sponsorship, all the way up to multi-million-dollar campaigns nationally and internationally, and everything in between. That's me on Twitter, @CPBayless. That's my email address if you want to shoot me a note if you have questions. And that link there, my understanding is that's going out to everybody. You can take it down if you want or wait for the recording. That answers the question, what do we replace gold, silver, bronze with? So right there is a sample sponsorship proposal template for you to use. Don't use it yet until we've got through the session. Okay, so when I say sponsor, I mean people in these areas: brand management, business development, marketing, product placement, sales, sponsorship, obviously, and communications. These are the people you're asking for money from. Deliberately missing from this list are corporate philanthropy, corporate social responsibility, corporate foundations. When you are looking for sponsorship, you are looking for marketing, not philanthropy. And so you are looking to connect with these people. As I'm talking about what sponsors are looking for, reflect back on this definition of sponsor, which may be slightly different than what you're used to thinking when you approach companies for money. Okay, so to frame today's webinar, I want to take you through 3 case studies. These are my Goldilocks case studies. This represents the work that I did with a client who is a sponsor, someone looking to invest money in a property, a sponsorship seeker, probably all the people on this webinar. They retained my firm to go out and find a place for them to invest their money. And I came across actually dozens of organizations, and all of them fit into these 3 categories, but 3 really stood out, and I'm going to share them with you today. I know I'm not supposed to make slides with all this text on it, but I want, when you get these slides, I want it to be useful to you. So I promise not all will be so text heavy. My first stop on behalf of my client was with a well-known large membership organization, stellar reputation, humongous social media presence, right? Big, big brand. Went to the website, gold, silver, bronze package. In that gold, silver, bronze package were things that I had no interest in on behalf of my client. I read through all 17 pages of the sponsorship package, and I found this line that every sponsorship package has, but nobody means, which is, don't see something you like, let us know, and we can customize something for you. So I phoned them, and I emailed them 5, 6, 7 times, and I waited. Weeks, 2 weeks went by, and I finally heard back from these folks. And I was willing to wait because they're so big and such a perfect fit for my client. They told me that I had to take all of the benefits that I didn't want, plus the ones that I did want. And they told me over and over and over again it was going to cost me. So in other words, my client did not want an exhibit space at their conference, but I had to take it, and I had to put people at it. We did not have a fit, and this property had no interest in building something custom. They wanted me to pick something from a menu. So what did I do? Well, of course, I picked one of these options, right? Not at all. I moved on. And I found a second sponsorship property, sponsorship seeker. Same thing. They run a conference and some events and some really interesting stuff. Equally well-known organization in the sector. Their sponsorship package focused on nothing but their mission, their vision, pictures of the people they're helping, a list of how my sponsorship dollars will be converted into mission delivery, and they're going to help all these people with my money. It focused entirely on them and their needs, not at all on my client's interests. If I can't tell my client how this will deliver a marketing value to them, we do not have a sponsorship deal. I reached out. I sent an email, I sent a phone call, left a message, I made a phone call, and this one only took a week, and I finally heard back. Got on the phone, the individual on the phone couldn't answer any of my questions. Who's your membership? Who's coming to the event? They had no idea. Beyond, quote, all Canadians. You know, all Canadians should care about what we do. The general public is interested in what we do. You should know that the general public is a terrible sponsorship audience. There are no brands really that are targeting the so-called general public. My client was no exception. They wanted one very specific type of professional. And while they might individually care about making donations, their business required them to be profitable. So I moved on. This is an incredibly important message to take home. Sponsorship is never philanthropy. It isn't subtly philanthropy. It is not overtly philanthropy. Sponsorship is marketing. Sponsorship exists in the for-profit space, and charities are using it to raise money. It is not fundraising, and it is never philanthropy. It's a marketing technique with marketing ROI measurement. Being a good cause is not enough. In fact, I've heard brands that I work with tell me the cause is irrelevant. We don't want to hear this. It's uncomfortable, but it is a market reality. So I moved on. And I found the sponsorship package that Goldilocks chose. I reached out to a small organization, unknown, but I knew they had access to my target audience. I went to the website, and in their sponsorship section, I found stats about their audience, event attendees, members, donors, board members. It was exactly our target market, and it was clear they knew their audience. I then saw a line that said, we do everything custom, give us a call. I called the number, and someone answered. I didn't have to wait at all. They answered the phone. I asked them about their sponsorship package. Can I have one? And they said, we don't have one. Everything we do is custom and based on your needs. If we don't have a fit, there's no need to waste your time on a sponsorship package. In other words, why guess when I can just tell them what I'm interested in? She then started asking me questions about my goals and my clients' needs. So I told her everything. Then she invited me to ask questions, and I did, all about their audience, about their members. She told me everything. I asked about their approach and philosophy. She asked me what I value, what I prize. We had a fit. At the end of the call, she said to me, does it sound like we have a fit? Can I put together something and send it over to you to get the feedback from your client? I got the package by the end of the day. The best sponsorship package was no package at all. 3 years later, after these stories that I'm sharing with you happened, my client and that person, that third prospect, are still doing business together because they were willing to tailor something. So I would argue, I think that we all have a sense that we should be tailoring, that we should be customizing, that our sponsors are looking for a return on investment. I would argue that we all know this intuitively, but what we struggle with as a sector is the how. How do we do this? How do we make the sponsorship package that Goldilocks chose? And I'm going to show you. I've broken this down into 5 stages of sponsorship sales in order: inventory building and valuation, prospecting, getting the meeting and what to do once you have it. Note that prospecting and getting the meeting are not the same activity. The sponsorship proposal, number 4 in the list, that means it comes after all of the above, which is the exact opposite of how we currently do it, I think. And then last, activation, fulfillment, and renewal. These 3 things will probably be new to most of you. I'm going to explain them, I'm going to define them for you, and I'm going to show you why sandwiching these 3 things together actually makes a lot of sense. So, inventory building. This is a foreign concept, I think, to most charities and not-for-profits when our mission is based on impact, outcomes, outputs, and impact. Inventory is borrowed right from the retail world because we're selling marketing opportunity. So we need to build an inventory, a list of things to sell. Once you have your inventory, you have to determine what those assets, those things that make up your inventory, cost. So why am I suggesting that this is where you must start? Before you build a budget, before you have a sponsorship package, before you decide you need to talk to TELUS or Nike, why is this the first place to start? Because your inventory tells you who you should be talking to. If your audience is full of lawyers who want to buy Beamers, you know who your audience, you know who your prospect is. It also guides your budget. If you don't have assets, you can't make any sales. It doesn't matter how much money you need. Gets your leadership, your board, your admin staff, everyone on the same page because you actually involve them in the process. If you have, say, program staff, not to pick on the program folks, but let's say program staff who are resistant to branding certain programs, bringing them in at this stage and showing them that without this, you can't make your organizational budget changes the conversation. You may still not get to brand things, but you reduce your budget as a result. Major sponsorship requires a major inventory. So inventory building 101. This is kind of what everyone does, right? Logo placement, speaking opportunity, newsletters, database, social media, and so on. I presented at an event with a sponsor, with a brand. And they turned to me during this presentation and said, but Chris, you're missing something. And I said, what? And she said, exactly. You don't know because you haven't asked your sponsor yet. And when you think back to that third example in the Goldilocks story, her inventory was built by asking me questions, right? She had a list of things that she was willing to offer, but then I told her exactly what my client was looking for. Then they built out the inventory based on that. In other words, you want to involve your sponsor right away in the inventory building phase, long before you're ready to ask them for money. So you go through the inventory process. You have a giant pile of stuff to sell. Then the immediate question is, what is this stuff worth? So let's talk valuation. This is the current practice. I love this photo, the shoulder shrug method, right? If I ask you what a logo placement is worth on a sign in a lobby at a conference, you're going to shrug your shoulders probably and say you don't know. I can tell you it's about 1/3 of a penny per view. It's not good. Most orgs don't know how to do valuation. So current practice, not best practice, is making a tiered sponsorship package and dividing your goal across 3 levels. Simply doing what you did last year because it seems to work. Starting with how much money you need, and then determining that title sponsorship must be worth X, and of course, just making it up. There's a problem with this method. Every single thing you have to sell has an independent market value, and it's verifiable. You can't make it up anymore. So what do? Make a list of every single asset you have to offer without exception, Check. You've done that in the inventory phase. Look at how much it will cost your sponsor to get the same exposure elsewhere. Is a tweet worth $1,000 for you? If it is, did you know that your sponsor can target your Twitter followers directly by paying Twitter to do so? If they can do it for $500, they're not going to give you $1,000. What's more, if they do it for $10,000 without you and you charge $1,000, you are leaving major dollars on the table. You have to look at the value of your tangible and intangible assets. Coca-Cola teaming up with the Canadian Cancer Society, for example, isn't just saying we support cancer research. Like it or not, that's also an endorsement of Coca-Cola. That's an intangible value. That may not be the intention of the partnership, but that is the reality in the marketplace. Your intangible assets are highly valuable. When you're doing your research, look to newspapers, digital media, social media advertising, and a cross-section of similar properties. So if you determine your audience is 40-year-old, high net worth moms, 3 or more kids who live in the suburbs, anyone advertising to them becomes a similar property. And you can go and look at magazines and television shows and commercials that cater to that market. And you can find out beyond any shadow of a doubt exactly what your sponsorship prospect would pay to go around you or to go through you. Overwhelmingly, sponsorship seekers undervalue, way undervalue, overwhelmingly. I've had one client to date that was overvalued. The rest are significantly undervalued. So lack of valuation is costing you money, big time. I'm going to share with you a case study. 2 identical properties. So remember, properties are sponsorship seekers or events or conferences, something against which you sell sponsorship. In this case, it was 2 races, different geographies, but similar sized cities in Canada. So I probably narrowed the scope to like maybe 10 events. There were races, right? There were marathons. So you could probably figure out almost who I'm talking about, but I won't give it away. So 2 identical properties, different geographies, exact same sponsor, not the same company, Dave at the same company. Property A is giving away space for Dave to hand out products for free to attendees. Property A sees this as a value add to their attendees, brings them back every year, and is not charging the sponsor for this. Property A is afraid because they think they'll lose the sponsor in this value add. Property B, who's a client of mine, did a valuation of the exact same asset to the exact same company for the exact same property, and they're selling it for $50,000. Property A is giving Dave, pictured here, for free the ability to give out product. Property B is charging Dave $50,000 over 6 years. That's 300 grand. Property A is undervaluing, and Dave knows it. Your sponsors know when you are undervaluing your assets. Dave's job is not to give to charity. Dave's job is to sell product. So he is absolutely ecstatic that Property A has no idea what their assets are worth. So there isn't just a few $100s on the table. This is a big change. This is a deal breaker, I think, for most organizations. And when I'm representing a client looking to be a sponsor, I ask to see the valuation numbers. I don't want people to just make up the values, and that is happening more and more. Okay, so you built your inventory. You've done your valuation. You know what you have to offer. You know what it's worth. Now, who do you sell it to? Let's prospect. The first stop for charities and charities and not-for-profits is your board of directors. You're all rolling your eyes right now. And if you're in a room watching this with other people, you're talking about how your board does not open doors. Believe me, I've been there. Nocontactitis, right? Your board doesn't have contacts. They can't make an introduction. You sent them an email, asked them for contacts. You know they know these people. They still didn't deliver. Very frustrating. I have the cure for nocontactitis. I spent years in a lab developing the cure for boards with nocontactitis, and it's actually really affordable. It's a cup of coffee. Treat your board and committee members like sponsors. E-blasting them and asking them for contacts will not work. You know it doesn't work because you all rolled your eyes when I said you should work with your board. Meet board members for a cup of coffee, one-on-one. Ask them for help. Ask them for advice. Research each board member individually and current sponsors and go to them with a list of 3 people you know they know and ask them for an introduction. Not, do you have any contacts, but I'd love to talk to Kevin at TELUS to ask him for his advice on how we can better serve TELUS. Could you make an introduction? If you take this approach, 1, it will work, and 2, if it doesn't work, you need a new board. Or you need a fundraising committee who eventually will ask why your board isn't doing this stuff. But you have to have the right folks in place, and you won't know until you've used this process. You would be shocked at who knows whom when you use a more direct major gift style approach with your sponsors and with your board members. Obviously using LinkedIn to determine who's in your network and who they're connected to in concentric circles. Start with those closest to you. When you want money, ask for advice. Advice, ask for money, right? Sit down with your board members, ask them for their advice on who you should be working with. Ask them to make a connection for you so you can ask that person for advice on how you can work with them. Asking for referrals from current sponsors, volunteers, committees, investors, board, business contacts, service providers, your own referral network. 2 or 3 people you know they're connected to, you will have 50 introductions in no time. But sometimes you have to go in cold. Ask for an intro from all the sources we've covered, right? So you have a cold contact, nobody knows them, ask anyway. Write the email for them. All they have to do is forward it. Do you know, I see you know Kevin from TELUS. Could you send him this email making an introduction? Failing that, find something in common and warm up the call with an email. But not just any email. I'm going to tell you exactly what to write. These are my 3.5 rules to email success. 1, no emails longer than 2 sentences, no exceptions. That is not a typo. Sentences, not paragraphs. 2, never send a proposal, your mission, your website. The only action you want them to take is to hit reply or forward. Right? You want your prospects to reply to you or forward it to the right person. Having those giant signatures with like come to our gala and buy a table, that is the same as a sales pitch. Delete that stuff when you're cold emailing prospects. 3, never tell them what you need. Instead, ask them something. Ask them a question. Top secret rule number 4, Allison's rule. Bernie, who is on the call, Allison and Bernie are friends of mine. If you were all in a room, Bernie could vouch that this is absolutely true. Allison works for a brand. She makes decisions about sponsorship every single day. She invests in sponsorship. She and I did a presentation together, and she said her boss requests emails from her with 1 sentence only, describing the opportunity. He then says yes or no based on that 1 sentence. If you sent Allison a sponsorship package and a 6-page document about your mission and vision, how many people you're going to help, Allison cannot turn that into 1 sentence. You've been deleted. If instead you connect with Allison and tell her what you're looking for, which is what she really wants, people to pick up the phone and have a discovery session with her, then Allison can boil that down to 1 sentence and actually get you money. This is the reality we're dealing with in the sponsorship landscape. Okay, so I'm going to share with you an email that led to a 6-figure sponsorship, but I need to warn you first. This is my most controversial slide. It wasn't intentionally my most controversial slide, but I've had people, every time I present this in person, people stand up and say, this is a horrendous idea, it'll never work, it's unprofessional, it's inappropriate. I get, like half the room tells me how awful an idea this is. The other half silently tries it. And by the end of the presentation, sure enough, someone has a meeting. So it works. I had someone comment on please don't let this give you any ideas, comment on a webinar that this slide was disgusting. And so I wear this like a badge of honor because you'll see it definitely isn't. But it is a highly controversial slide. Now before I show it to you, I just got an email from someone the other day saying, I tried your technique, sent out 16 emails. I got 8 meetings as a result, 8 callbacks. Those 8 callbacks turned to 8 meetings. 2 were face-to-face. One of those face-to-face is a $20,000 sponsorship. So I said this at the beginning, nothing we're doing here is philosophical. When I say send an email with 2 sentences, I mean send an email with 2 sentences. I want you to try it, but prepare to be shocked. Hey Dave, I saw on LinkedIn that you're involved in X. I'd love to connect and ask your thoughts about a cool project that I'm working on. Are you free tomorrow at 3 o'clock? Chris. No title, just my name. This 2-sentence email creates havoc when I'm presenting this live. Copy it, paste it, send it, see what happens. Why does it work? It's so short they can't help but read it, right? You can't delete that from your iPhone without having read it already. You flatter them and ask them for advice. You're not looking for a sale in the email. You want to know whether or not you actually have an audience they're interested in. You give them a date and time, changing the decision from yes or no to whether or not the time works. It's not a 20-page proposal. It's focused on them, not you. And most of all, Allison's boss will read that. Okay. If you use the process that I've just described, you will get meetings. Absolute fact. Send a very short email, engage your board directly, engage your current sponsors, engage the people that you buy products from. You are going to get meetings, lots of meetings. So what do you do? First of all, don't panic. If people want to meet with you, it's because they either like your org, they want to hear more from you, they like the person that made the introduction. They are looking to connect with another person and nothing more than that. You don't have to sell them anything. You're just going to get to know them. However, when you go, you should bring this one thing with you. Extremely important, the thing I bring to every single sponsorship meeting without exception. If you've shifted away from the webinar now and are catching up on email, I ask you to come back because you're going to want to see this. When you go to the meeting, bring the following. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is my second most controversial slide. When I do this live, and I bet there are some comments coming in right now, when you say nothing, do you mean a one-pager? What about business cards? What about a pen and a paper? When I say nothing, I mean absolutely nothing. So I added this qualifying slide. The following things are not examples of nothing. One-pagers, proposals, annual reports, buck slips, infographics, leave behind bookmarks. Bring nothing. Why? Mitch Hedberg says it far better than I ever could. When someone hands you a flyer, it's like they're saying, here, you throw this away. You bring stuff to a meeting. You are bringing assumptions. Hand it to your prospect, they're going to put it in the garbage. When I talk to brands, they tell me stories about how they throw out thousands of unsolicited sponsorship packages and buck slips every single week. They stack them up on their desk and they throw them out. They might look at it to feign interest because you're watching them, but if they do, they're not listening to you. And if they're listening to you, they're not looking at the information. Bring nothing. The other thing is, if you walk into an organization that absolutely hates exhibit spaces, and you have a one-pager about a conference and how great the exhibit space will be, you just lost your sale. Bring nothing. Here's the other thing bringing stuff does. It tells your prospect you don't care about them or their needs. Harsh, but absolutely true. You care about telling them something versus hearing something. You have assumptions about what they want and what they can do for you and what you can do for them. Most importantly, though, it robs you of accomplishing the only goal of the first meeting, which is to get the second meeting. So what do you bring? You bring lots of questions. These questions. Who's your target audience? How do you normally engage in sponsorship? What does your target market value? What can you tell me about your sales goals for the coming year? What would you consider to be the most important elements of a sponsorship package? What's the one thing you must have in a sponsorship package? The last conference you went to, what were they doing that was really exciting about sponsorship? What does your organization hate about sponsorship? You ask these questions as a starting point, and the rest of the questions flow. Remember, you're going to get a copy of all these slides, so you'll have these 5 questions. Okay, so look at all the work you've done before you've made a sponsorship package, right? What do we do in the sector? We make a sponsorship package. We pore over what goes at each of the levels. We have internal debates about the language we use and do we put the right mission statement in the boilerplates, right? We spend so much time on the sponsorship package. I'm telling you that the biggest sponsorship deals I have done had no sponsorship package at all. And in one case, the sponsor brought the package and said, here, we want to do this. They knew exactly what they wanted. They didn't need to see anything from us. So now we can make a sponsorship package. Sponsorship Proposals 101. Gold, silver, bronze is dead. Everything must be customized. Gold, silver, bronze has been dead for about 20 years outside of the charitable sector, and 10 years ago it stopped having any relevance whatsoever in the charitable sector. You absolutely have to give this up. The word gold over someone's logo adds $0 in value to their logo. We don't need it. Think menu, not levels, right? If somebody wants speaking opportunities and blog posts and product giveaways, like Dave did at that sponsorship property, Dave didn't care at all if he was gold, silver, bronze. All he wanted was the things he purchased. So what do? You meet with your prospects, you add up all of the things they told you that they value, you apply your valuation tool, and you create a package, just like Goldilocks number 3 did for me. Some sections are standard, like who you are, the rest is custom. Market draft, send it to your prospect, and ask them for a follow-up meeting to make sure you've hit everything the way that they wanted you to, and that the amount is correct. And, of course, download the sponsorship proposal template. That's it. Well, it's not the end of the presentation, but that's it as it relates to sponsorship packages. One slide in this entire hour is spent on the sponsorship proposal. That's how important it is. Barely. You don't need a sponsorship package. You are the salesperson. Should you create one? Should you do the process internally? Sure. Should you send it to a sponsor? Absolutely not, until you've met with them at least once. At least one good discovery meeting where you know exactly what they want. Okay, so you get the money. You submit your sponsorship package. You get the money, you're all done, you do your happy dance, right? Not so much. Now it's time for this thing called activation. Activation is the switching on of the sponsorship, right? It's your responsibility to ensure that your sponsor gets everything they paid for. Your responsibility. If they don't send you the logo, they're going to ask you for a refund. So get the logo. I just got an email this morning from a coaching client who said, hey Chris, what do you do when a sponsor asks for half their money back because they don't feel like they got good value from the sponsorship deal? And unfortunately, the answer is you give them half their money back. Unless they're wrong, then you prove that they're wrong. Tickets, ads, logo placement, press, media, putting it in a press release, their logo in a press release is not enough. If you promise press or exposure in a local newspaper, you're going to have to buy it. Not only do you have to deliver, but you're going to send them a report proving you delivered. So, common errors in the activation space. Not planning at least 10% of your budget for activation expenses. 10% of your budget. Not charging your sponsor for this as part of your valuation. The signs that you put up, your sponsors pay for that. If they want banners, they pay for the banners. Now, you buy the banners, but you charge them for that. Everything you spend money on is part of your sponsorship valuation. Sell wine sponsorship, you buy the wine and charge them for the wine and put their logo on and give them speaking opportunities. Wine sponsorship is a $3,000 to $10,000 cash sponsorship. Not coaching your sponsors to invest money in activation. It is so critically important that your sponsors take advantage of the sponsorship. Otherwise, they don't get the most out of it and they walk away. So if your sponsor has $10,000 to spend, I wouldn't recommend selling them a $10,000 package. Make sure that they can activate properly. If they're going to give you product to give away and they're going to spend $5,000 on shipping or $500 on shipping, charge them $9,500. Make this part of your negotiation so that they can take full advantage of the sponsorship opportunity. Take a picture of this. Share it on Twitter. Feel free to share it, but take a picture of this. This is a simple activation template that you can use to make sure you stay on track. So on the left are all of the assets your sponsor asked to purchase, right? Design the signage, logos from sponsors. These are all the things that you have to do to be able to deliver. the deadline for them to provide it, and your internal lead, right? So Elaine, George, Kramer, that's your staff, or you if you're a fundraiser of one. Every week, check into your activation template and make sure everything is on track. If you don't get the names from your sponsor by May 1st of who's going to be sitting at the VIP table, they're not going to take advantage of that table, which means they bought something they didn't use. And that either means you're in refund territory, or it means that you didn't do discovery well and you sold them things they actually didn't want, or both. It's not a good place to be in. After you've spent the money and made budget, you don't want to be issuing refunds. All right. So I did a presentation not dissimilar to this for a private group who are doing their sponsorship internally, a for-profit organization. I finished the presentation. Someone came up to me after and said, "You didn't tell everyone to say thank you." And I said, "I'll be honest, like, do I have to? Of course, people know to say thank you, right?" And then I had a conversation with Allison again, and she said, "You know, one of my biggest pet peeves are people don't thank me." And I realized that actually maybe there's some value in reminding people that you have to say thank you. But actually, I think saying thank you once in English or French or whatever language you and your sponsor speak, once I think is actually not enough. You have to do it once in the common language, and the second time you have to do in the language of marketing. Here's how to say thank you in the language of marketing. A fulfillment report. What's a sponsorship fulfillment report? I'm glad you asked. Doing what you said, the fulfillment report is proving it, right? Activation is doing what you said, the fulfillment report is proving it. The fulfillment report gives your sponsors a tool to prove to their internal audience and decision makers that they got the ROI expected, right? So you're given a budget of $50,000 to invest in sponsorship. You owe an explanation to your VP of marketing at some point as a sponsor whether or not you got what you said you would. It sets you up for renewing the sponsorship within weeks of the event or end of your campaign. When you deliver a fulfillment report is the perfect time to ask for next year's sponsorship investment. I just tried to very quietly take a sip of my coffee or tea, so I apologize if you all heard that. Fulfillment report basics. Here's how to do it. Take a picture of every single thing you promised your sponsor. Logos, program ads, people, everything you promised them, take a picture of. Get your official photographer to do it, and do what I do. Walk around with your iPhone and take pictures as well, so you've got backup. If you promise web traffic, tweets, take absolutely screenshots of everything. Get a sample of everything you promised your sponsor, right? So you get your web traffic, your logo placement, everything in one report with stats from your event, who came, if it was an event, or a campaign, whatever it is that you're seeking sponsorship for. Put it all together with the stats, the pictures, and call a meeting. Yes, another meeting with your sponsors. But here's the magic. Use this template. Bring to them, so take a picture of this, or wait until tomorrow when you get the recording. Right, dinner delivered, signage at event, branded 10 cards, 10 guests in attendance, right? Whether you delivered or didn't deliver, you're going to tell them. Then you're going to show them all the pictures to prove that you did everything you said you would. Then when you call the meeting, you can sit down with them and ask them what they liked, what they didn't like. Why didn't they take advantage of the 10 guests in attendance? Oh, because they don't care about attending galas. Then what do you care about? What can we give you more of? Then you can ask them to help you fashion next year's sponsorship package, which means that we are in renewal. Remember I said activation, fulfillment, renewal are one stage. Good activation sets you up for good fulfillment. Good fulfillment means you've earned the right to ask for them to come back next year. Deliver your report, ask the sponsor what they thought. Ask them what you should change in order to have them come back next year. Once they tell you, ask them, if you do that, do they promise to come back? Do they agree to come back? If they say yes, ask to send over a draft report for feedback, or draft package for their feedback. And the process starts again, right? We're back where we started. But the magic here is when you do this in this process, within 2 weeks of wrapping up your conference, your event, your campaign, you've got your sponsors confirmed for next year, saving you a ton of time during the lead up of the next event. Think of how budgeting would feel if you had 80% of your sponsorship already sold for next year, right? That's a pretty good place to be. Good activation leads to good fulfillment. Good fulfillment leads to renewal. And it all hinges on having a good inventory, a sponsor-centric approach, valuation, and customized sponsorship packages. You follow this process, renewal just falls into place without much effort. Okay, so if you want to be the sponsorship package that Goldilocks chose, you should follow this process. The 5 stages of sponsorship: inventory, building, and asset valuation, then prospecting, which leads to getting the meeting, then the sponsorship proposal, followed by activation, fulfillment, and renewal. We're going to move to questions, I think, but before we do, I want to leave you with this thought. The sponsorship proposal does not make the sale. You do. We spend an awful lot of time sending out sponsorship packages and hoping we make the sale, but the sales tool stays home. That's you. Try this. Put the sponsorship package in your desk, lock the drawer, and go out and meet with people. You will be shocked and surprised at how differently your sponsors react to that approach. So once again, that's the link to the sponsorship proposal template. That's me on Twitter. That's my email address. I'm happy to open it up for questions, and I tried to leave more time than I normally do for questions, so I hope you don't steer me wrong and you have lots and lots of questions for me.
It's wonderful, Chris. Thank you so much. We do have a lot of questions coming in, and I encourage everyone to go ahead and type your questions into the chat box so that we can try to get Chris to answer them. And just a reminder as well, as Chris mentioned in the beginning, we will be sending out that link to the template in the email recording email that you'll get tomorrow with the webinar recording and the slide deck as well. So I know some of you were asking about the 2-sentence intro that Chris mentioned. All of that will be in the slide deck, and you will have all of that tomorrow. So let's jump right into questions, Chris. First question, we had somebody ask, what if you send a package to a potential sponsor and tell the partner that it will be tailored for them? What are your thoughts on that?
So what if you send them a standardized package first and then promise that you will tailor it after?
Yes.
Well, I have to say, it begs the question, what is the point in making that sponsorship package at all? And the point is, I believe that you secretly hope they'll just love the silver level and send you a check. So that's my one critique of that approach. Second, if I walked onto a car lot, or if I walked into Best Buy and someone handed me a catalog full of products and said, here, have a look. Once you've looked at this catalog of products, if you want something else, come and find me and I'll sell it to you, I'd be offended, right? And so I know that that offense is not the goal and it's not your purpose, right? Like we as fundraising professionals, I think, are incredibly sharp people, but we're suffering from lack of resources and major time crunch. So we want it to be easier. If you send a sponsorship package first, there's nothing subtle about what you're saying. And I had this experience, right, with the first 2 sort of Goldilocks clients. It was, please buy this, but if we have to, we'll customize something. So if you want to send them something, and you've already talked to them, and they've asked you to send them something, but they didn't have time for discovery, what I recommend is a simplified business case. Define your audience beautifully, exactly who's involved in your database, who's coming to your event, what they react to, what they respond to, what they like. If you do that and you send it over to your sponsor, they can make a decision as to whether or not there's any point in even having the conversation. But sending them a package where they will kind of pick off the shelf what they want, you're looking at a 1 to 2% success rate, like that of direct mail. And you're risking being blacklisted, right, by them saying, oh, it's one of those people who are just firing sponsorship packages. So until you've got permission to submit, I would recommend not submitting anything. psychologically, it's tough, but believe me, it works.
Wonderful. Thanks, Chris. So let's dive into a little bit of clarification around some of the terms that you were using, because we have a few questions on a couple of those. So first up, can you give some more examples of what you would consider inventory in a nonprofit setting?
Yeah, so I think that your inventory, it will vary, but I like to see a good blend of what we call push marketing, which is logo on stuff, e-blasts, free samples, goodie bags, and pull marketing, which is, we're working with, Honda, and we're going to kick off our event at the Honda location, and everyone who does a test drive of the new HRV, gets entered into a raffle. I worked with an org. They were interested in collecting email addresses, right? Castle, even if you could give someone your database, Castle makes it virtually impossible for anyone to use it anyway. So we had a contest where you entered your contact information, email address for a chance to win an iPad. So internally, the way I like to work it is, we have the conversation with as many people as possible, program team, finance folks. They know an awful lot about assets too, maybe surprisingly to some. We sit around and we talk about what can we stick logos on, one, and then two, how can we engage our audience with our sponsors? Now, you can't imagine doing something at the Honda lot without Honda as a prospect, right? It's really hard to come up with ideas, which is why the next step is to connect with those who you think care about your audience and ask them what they're interested in. So step one is internal, thinking about the push and pull marketing opportunities. Step two is external, talking to your sponsors. And step three is a survey of the landscape. What are other folks doing in your area? So if you are a cancer research org, don't look at other cancer research orgs. Think instead about your audience. Who else is catering to 40-year-old high net worth moms, if that's your audience? And if they're going to, I don't know, the fishing and hunting show, look at what the fishing and hunting show is doing by way of sponsorship and contests and so on. So I think from an inventory perspective, it's actually okay to start with a weak inventory after the internal process and then to start to engage external stakeholders to find other things to sell.
Great. And what about intangible assets? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so intangible assets are, that's the gravy for the charitable sector, right? We know that if you care passionately about a particular organization, we know that it influences buying decision. So the value of your brand actually has a sponsorship value. So while it might, a tweet or a logo placement might be worth 0.5 cent per tweet or something like that per person on your Twitter feed, because it's you sending it out and endorsing that organization, therefore endorsing that organization, there becomes an intangible power. And so the way that I articulate the so-called intangibles, I add a percentage increase to the value of the asset. And so, if they get exclusivity, I might add 20% to the value of the assets. If I know that the people in my database went to my university, for example, if I'm a university and they're alumni and they feel really connected to my university because I've done the studies to know, then I might add a 30% quote intangible value qualifier. So the valuation stuff it's kind of boring and confusing, but the take home is when you do your catalog of what everything is worth, think about what value you add with your brand, with your audience, and around things like exclusivity, so that you're not just selling logo placements, you're actually selling logo placement plus the privilege of working with you. So if a bank comes along and says, we want to be the only bank, well, that's a 50% intangible value. So this is something you're going to have significant debate about, which is a good thing, so long as you add some intangible values to your valuation. So don't leave that piece blank.
Great, excellent advice. And how about asset valuation? Can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the how of asset valuation is very much in concept, actually isn't that difficult. In practice, it's really intimidating, and so people are reticent. People are nervous to do it. But basically, I'm using my hands to show kind of a large gap, right? That it represents your inventory. You have this big inventory. You know the values of nothing. The goal then is to start to look at similar media. So you want to put a logo on your website? It's going to be in front of 40-year-old high net worth moms. How much would a bank have to pay to put their logo on another website? Well, Google ads will tell you that. Twitter ads will tell you that. You can log in for free and set up a fake campaign targeting your audience. So you start to catalog the really simple stuff like logo placements, like product giveaways, like sampling. These all have, for your geography, established values and best practice. And you start to chip away at the unknown. So you kind of know the value of everything by comparing it to similar media. And then you have this group of things that are like a speaking opportunity, which isn't a logo placement, but it's kind of like it. So you start to transfer the values to similar things within your inventory. And then you're left, so you have these things that you know what they're worth. Then you have these things that you're pretty sure you know what they're worth. And then you have this chunk of assets where you're basically using the shoulder shrug method. So you can either have a professional valuation done, option one, and that isn't like a subtle way of saying you should hire me. I mean, you should just have it done by someone. Or you can use that to negotiate with your prospects. In my view, once you've figured out the market rate of the really firm stuff, the obvious stuff, not obvious to you until you do the research, then you can sit down with your prospects and say, how important is it to you to get an email address? How important is it to you to run this competition? What would you be comfortable paying for that competition? So it narrows the scope of the unknown where you can have a kind of a reasonable negotiation. So ultimately the goal is to shrink down what you're guessing at. Whereas now I think the typical approach is, that event over there is saying 10K for gold, that's what we'll do. So, start with the things that are obvious and published. Newspapers publish their ad costs. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, they all let you go in and create campaigns to know exactly what your prospect would pay to target the same keyword or the same audience.
Great. I hope that helps clarify some of that for all of you. Now we have a few questions on cold calling. So first up, with cold calling, does this sort of no package strategy still work with that?
Yeah, definitely. So here's the thing. Never send a package until someone asks you to do it or until you ask them and they agree. That's step one. Step two, if they ask you, still don't send it unless you know exactly what to include, right? In Canada, I have US and Canadian clients. In Canada, no thank you translates to send me a sponsorship package, right? That is no thank you in standard Canadian English. So when someone says, oh, wow, okay, that sounds like a good cause, why don't you send me a sponsorship package? They're setting you up to tell you that the committee voted no, right? That is not what you want. So never submit unless you have permission, one. And two, once you get permission, never submit until you know exactly what to send them. They won't say yes to a sponsorship package unless it suits their needs. And if you don't know what their needs are, then you can't do it. So cold call, cold email, absolutely do not send a sponsorship package. When you go to networking events, you would never dream of walking up to someone, handing them a sponsorship package and walking away. Never, right? It would be the most awkward thing ever. You walk up to them, you shake their hand, you see if you have something in common. You tell them what you do for a living. They tell you that they have interest. You describe your audience and kind of what you're aimed at, and they tell you about their company and whether or not there's a fit. Then you agree to meet again. Phone and email is exactly the same, right? You do not want to be firing people sponsorship packages unless you've been invited to do so cold. Now, it's terrifying to change your entire strategy overnight. So I recommend take 20% of your prospects. So let's say there's 100 people in your pipeline. 20 of them practice the approach I'm talking about. The other 80, e-blast, like shotgun style, all you want, and see which one works better. If my approach works better, switch everything. If the other approach works better, send me a note because I'd be fascinated to hear. So like, don't throw everything out overnight. This is not me telling you that you've been doing it all wrong and therefore you're not a good fundraiser. Far from it. These are concepts that I've tried in the field. Clients try. They work. Some will work with you. Others won't. Try them out, but don't throw out the entire process you're currently using. Split it up. Try a couple pieces and see if you send an email that short, whether or not you get more meetings than sending an unsolicited sponsorship package.
Great, and we have a wonderful question here from Anna asking, I find getting the meeting is the toughest part. How do you overcome that barrier?
Yeah, so I think when most folks are coming at the sponsorship space, the two things that they find most challenging is finding out who to talk to and getting the meeting. The reason for that, in my experience, is that you don't know your audience, or you think your audience is broader than it is, right? In Canada, we say the word niche like niche, but so there's an American saying, the rich is in the niches. The rich is in the niche in Canada. The smaller, more niche your audience is, the easier it is to get the meeting. 40-year-old, high net worth moms with 3 or more children who live in Canada, Thornhill, West Van, like very, very narrow. You describe that group of people to a Lexus dealer, you will have your calendar packed because it happens to be their target audience. They sell cars to 40-year-old high net worth moms. That is the car that goes to 40-year-old high net worth moms. Middle class moms with lots of kids, that's a Honda Odyssey like all day long, right? They want to sell minivans to those people. You know who your audience is. You can pick up the phone and call just about anybody and say, we have this group of people who I think are your target market. Do you have 5 minutes? I just want to see if there's common ground. If not, you'll never hear from me again. If so, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you like to work with those people. If you approach calls that way, there's no gatekeeper in the world who will keep you out of a meeting like that, right? It's a respectful approach, but you know your audience incredibly well. So for me, getting the meeting is tough is a subjective term. So for me, if I get a 20% response rate from my emails and phone calls, like 20% agree to meet, I consider that actually really good. So I put out 100 kind of probes, emails, whatever, and 20% agree to meet me. That's not terrible. Recently, the example I shared during the webinar was someone who had a 50% close rate. So if for you want a 100% close rate, then actually your pitch could be perfect. You just have to change your expectation as to how many people are willing to meet. But the key is absolutely, in my view, knowing your audience and approaching this as a discovery versus a sales call.
Great. And we've got another wonderful question here from Wendy, and I think other organizations may find themselves in the same situation. So I'll just read out Wendy's question here for you. Do you have any recommendations on how to navigate a longtime sponsor that has paid significantly less for sponsorship historically? We have a wine sponsor that has paid $1,000 for a 250-person event, and it sounds like we have undervalued the opportunity. Are there any recommendations on how to maintain and build this relationship?
Yeah, definitely. So first, I will say, Wendy, kudos to you. Charging people for wine sponsorship never happens. People get free wine and call that wine sponsorship. It is officially my biggest pet peeve in sponsorship. You are asking people for money for your wine sponsorship, unless it's just 1,000 in, 1,000 out in wine, then we should talk. But the fact that you're even asking for cash for wine sponsorship, I'm impressed. I seldom get that question, so I'm definitely impressed. But your actual question was, how do we get someone who's paying under to pay the proper amount? And so step one, do evaluation. They may actually not be they may not be underpaying. Do your evaluation. Then sit down with your sponsor. Well, then you have two options, really. The first is, was this sponsor there from the beginning when you had no one coming to your event and they're incredibly loyal? Not everything is about cash, right? This could be part of their longevity as a sponsor. So that's one. Two, the second option, which is my preferred option, is to sit down with them and show them, we've gone through the process of doing evaluation. It was time to refresh. We hadn't done one in a long time, ever, but we hadn't done one in a really long time. We redid the valuation. The wine sponsorship is actually, we're valuing at around $3,000 or $5,000 or $10,000. And be honest with them and say, our goal is to have a successful event so we can accomplish this thing in the community. If $1,000 is your budget, tell me what you love about the wine sponsorship, and maybe we have another option for you at the $1,000 level that gives similar exposure. Or we would love to get you up to the $3,000 level so that we're at market value. But we don't think it's fair to just ask you for that next year. What do you think of a 3-year plan to get you to this amount, one? And two, use it as an opportunity to refresh the partnership. What other things can we be doing for you to help you get more customers, or whatever their goal is? Tell me more about what you're trying to achieve so that we can make sure you're getting it. Use it as a way to open up the partnership and have a conversation again. If they're underpaying by $9,000, you want to sell that to somebody else, right? You absolutely owe it to your organization to sell it to somebody else. And to add a sinister note, if they're anything like Dave was in my example, they know full well that they're ripping you off. So now this isn't me telling you to go out and like drop the hammer on all of your sponsors at all, because it may not be the case. But I think if you take that approach, here's where we want to be, here's where we are, what's the best way to get there, and how can we add more value as we go? If they walk away based on that, I would say they knew that it was undervalued. And frankly, if you're going to be bringing in $9,000 more for your cause, you should absolutely be looking elsewhere. But first, you absolutely must do your valuation because they're going to challenge that.
Thanks, Chris. And I think for our final question today, we're just going to throw this out there for those that have multiple sponsors for the same event. Do you have any tips for balancing this approach with those sponsors? Yeah,
so am I to take it that, if you have like 20 sponsors and you can't call them gold, silver, bronze, what should you do? Is that the right way to interpret that question?
I agree. I think that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the thing. You have a sign in your lobby. Let's say you have 1,000 people walk by that sign in your lobby. You can charge, are you ready? $3 for a logo on that sign for every sponsor. You can list them, all 20 in order, and charge $3. You can put the word gold, silver, bronze above them. It's still worth $3. So a sign in a lobby but the word gold above it adds absolutely $0 in value. And in fact, I'll tell you, my conversations with sponsors, signs in lobbies, they think are worth actually $0. They see virtually no value at all in having a logo somewhere. McDonald's branding the Olympics, they see all kinds of value there. But nobody was calling them a gold sponsor. And it's the Olympics. Like, that's the place to do gold, silver, bronze. And they still wouldn't do it because it doesn't add anything. And so to me, the real problem at the heart of gold, silver, bronze is that it forces you, the sponsorship seller, to arbitrarily decide that gold gets 2 booths, silver gets 1, bronze gets 0, when actually your gold sponsor doesn't want any booths. So the gold, silver, bronze, I think, is a representation of an old mentality, an old approach to sponsorship, which is, we have this product, you should purchase it. The real way to sit down with your sponsors is to ask them exactly what they want and sell them that and only that. You do that with 20 sponsors, 2 weeks after the event, you will renew all 20 for next year, and you won't have to do any prospecting. So try this. Watch your Google Analytics to your sponsorship recognition page. I bet you'll get 30 people maybe, and all 30 are your competitors looking to steal your sponsors and your donors. The only people who look at donor recognition pages are fundraisers. So we'll try it. See how many people go to your gold, silver, bronze recognition page and actually click on a link. I bet not many. So I think the concern that if we take away this recognition piece, our sponsors will be unhappy, I think is unwarranted. I know from a valuation perspective, it actually adds nothing.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. We're going to cap it there because we are going a little over time now. And I just want to thank you again, Chris. A wonderful presentation. Thank you for the generous Q&A time. I think
My pleasure.
We were able to answer a lot of questions there, so that's fantastic. So before we sign off today, I just want to remind everyone that's still with us that we are following up with you by email with the webinar recording and presentation slides. You will get that tomorrow morning. We'll also include there a short link, or a link to a short survey, sorry. We do ask that you fill that out if you can. It takes just a minute. It's really helpful for us, helps us refine our webinar content and our delivery going forward. And you'll have an opportunity there to let us know if there's other topics or presenters that you'd like to see in future sessions. So do take a moment and fill that out for us. And with that, we'll sign off. Thank you again for joining us today. Thanks again, Chris. I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.